singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, tweet, tweet.
Welcome to Life is Good. I'm Heather McEwen, your ever-loving host, and here's a familiar face. Not just mine, which you can ignore, but Rick Ufford-Chase.
Hi.
Hi, I remember meeting you down by the lake when I was working at the Northern Star. And
yes, that's the first time we met.
And you were just there to help, as you've become just here to help no matter what we're doing.
That's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
We're supposed to just help each other.
I know. And before we get into the interview, it's all about me. And I'd like to thank the audience for coming too. The place is full. I didn't have enough chairs. I hope you don't mind standing back there.
And the crowd goes wild.
Oh, the crowd goes. They're so compliant. It's amazing. Give them a little chocolate, some lemon water, and they just shut up. Thank you. Anyway, yell out questions if you want to. Thank you. Anyway, my car was totaled a couple of years ago.
A year ago.
It was a year ago, in October, and it was squashed. It was like an accordion, and so Rick said to me, he hardly knew me. I mean, we didn't know each other.
Not very well.
He said, well, you know, I know how to find cars for people. I'm thinking, that's nice. And he said, if you want me to find you a car, I can find you a car. And so the insurance company was very generous because it was the other fellow's fault. It's hard to rear end yourself, depending on what kind of an acrobat you are. Anyway, the insurance company, so I said to Rick, they're giving me this much money, and I went back to the dealer that sold me the car that was squashed, and they told me that they'd have one for a few thousand more, and it was a sports car. And
yeah, it was not your car.
So what did you say? Oh, no.
I might have said something like, oh, no, that's not the car for me.
That's not the car for me. It's like, you know, I could barely get myself in it, and I'm only 5 feet tall. It's like, yeah, and it goes fast, and that's not me. But anyway.
We found the perfect car for you.
You found a car in Long Island, New York. Mm-hmm. You flew down. Mm-hmm. You said, I couldn't get enough cash out of my account because they wouldn't let it come out of my account right away.
So fast, right?
They said, no, the check won't clear in time for Rick to go down to New York. So I said, oh, what am I going to do now? And they said they want cash for the car. So Rick said, here's $8,000 cash from me, and or I'll write it on my account or something like that. You got your.
Somehow we managed to access it out of my account.
Rick used his money and said he didn't know me. He said, I'll go down and buy your car. I'll just take this $8,000 cash and take a flight down to New York and drive it back for you. And the next day, your mom and you drove up middle winter. Well, it's November. It was cold, and you said, "Come on, it's middle of the night." Grandma comes in, Mama comes in, and. She said, oh, just go out and learn how to drive it. And I said, I'm not driving in the dark. So you showed me where all the buttons were.
It's true.
And, I mean, you didn't know this man. Give him thousands of dollars, buys a car. He called me several times during the day and said, it's up on a rack. A rack?
Right, we were getting it looked at.
And there's no rust on it. And you made friends with the man who sold it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that worked out because he had not gotten when there was a lien on the car, and he had paid off the note. He had never gotten the title changed. And it turned out he was leaving 2 days later for India. He was from India.
Yeah.
And so we had to work out this whole deal where he let me take the car.
Yeah.
Without the title. I paid him all the cash. And then he said, I'll go to India and I'll get this renotarized and I'll send it to you. And it all worked.
It all worked out. And I wrote him a thank you letter on the anniversary of my car. It's a Prius, a Toyota Prius. Mm-hmm. You said, I found you a Prius. I said, I'd really rather have a Toyota.
That's right.
So, I mean, what do I know? Everybody's laughing back there. Unbelievable.
You know what's really funny? Tom, who actually is here. So Tom and I, as we've gotten to know each other the last 2 months, Tom and I discovered that he does the same thing.
What do
he
you
goes
do?
looking for cars for people all the time, just like I do.
Do you? This is Thomas Goodwin. We'll get him on eventually. He's a great guy. I met him at Saturday nights, winter Saturdays.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to you, Bob. That's a radio thing. Back to you, Bob.
I'm right with you. Keep going.
Okay, so thank you for the car.
You're welcome.
I was talking about trust levels and volunteerism above and beyond. Now, I don't know how many people go above and beyond like you, and your mother said, oh, he just does that.
Yeah, you know why?
No.
Because that's what she does.
I
learned this from my mother. It's really my mom.
So the next
Everybody
time...
calls her Abu, right, which is short for abuela in Spanish, because our son, when he was the first grandchild, and she did not want to be Grammy Ethel, So I said, how about Abuela? And she said, yeah, Abu. So she's been Abu to everybody ever since. Everybody calls her Abu.
Now, you went down to Central America for a year to learn how to speak Spanish.
I did. And then I worked for 20 years on the U.S.-Mexico border. That's how I became fluent.
You and I have to talk about that, but we'll talk about
Some
that
other time.
some other time. I absolutely applaud what you did there. Newport, we might as well talk about Newport because, as you know or don't know, Rick is running for mayor unopposed. And in my day, that used to be called by acclamation.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yes, well, that's my day. I'm so much older than you are.
Yes.
Shut up. We have a good time. Anyway, you can say anything to the mayor because he's one of us, which is very relaxing for me. You see the future of Newport with twinkling eyes.
That's a great way to put it. That's exactly how I see it. In fact, right after I announced that I was going to run for mayor, people kept saying, why would you do that? And, at first I was doing the thing that I think we do because it's about modesty, like an eye roll. Oh, yeah, I'll do it. And then I thought, after about a week, that's the wrong approach because actually I'm really excited about this.
I would be.
I'm really excited.
Do you remember
about
my reaction when you told me you were running?
Yeah, I do. You were a little nuts.
You didn't know I could jump that high.
So, but that's kind of what I just think Newport is an amazing place. I think it's an amazing place.
So do I.
And I've thought that for decades, even though I didn't live here. My mom grew up in Lowell. I didn't live in Lowell, but our family gathered for all holidays and all of our major family times my whole life.
And you've got
in
quite
Lowell.
a family.
And we've got quite a family. And so I knew the community relatively well for an outsider. And I've been in love with Newport. All my life I've thought, gosh, if I could live anywhere, I'd want to live on Lake Memphremagog in Newport.
Well, I grew up on Lake Memphremagog.
I do know that.
And we used to come over here to the Burns Theater, Frank's Steakhouse, everything else when I was growing up.
Were any of the dance halls still going in Newport?
I was young.
When you were, so they were still dance halls then?
Possibly. There was one
'Cause
over
there were
in
two,
front.
right?
There was one over in front of the Pick and Shovel,
Really?
and I think it's Planned Parenthood now.
No, that's gone.
Which is an ironic thing for dance halls and Planned Parenthood. I think they should go together, but what do I know? Anyway, I don't. But when I was growing up, there was Corky's on the other side of J.
Okay.
And it was a lovely place. None of my friends drank or anything. We just danced. And then we went over. My father would take us to the Rock Cliff in Quebec because we were in Quebec.
Yes.
But when we went dancing, my father and my stepmother, my mom died, so he married his first girlfriend from when he'd been a teenager, and they would clear the floor jitterbugging. So of course we were kind of proud to take Dad with us, even though he was taking us, and we take our boyfriends and girlfriends, 4 kids, and so there were 8 of us in the car plus Dad and Evelyn, and we would watch them dance, and we get up and dance, and that was what we called really good fun.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, the Winter Saturdays takes me right back.
That's cool because that's exactly how it was designed. I mean, so for me, I grew up in Lowell. My dad's cousins are the Warner clan, and they're the ones who built Missisquoi Manor in the early 70s, which had the dance hall and the bowling alley. Still has the bowling alley.
What a great mix.
And they had a Warner family band that would play every Friday and Saturday night. And so when I was up here for holidays and that kind of stuff, we would always go down and hang out at the dance hall with the Warners. And so for me, when we started talking about this at first, I was like, yeah, there ought to be a place like there used to be.
Yeah.
When everybody would come from all over.
All ages.
I don't know.
You didn't mind going with your parents.
I think I remember kids being a part of that. Like, I wasn't the only kid there. Like, families were really encouraged to go to the Missisquoi Manor, too.
It was a thing to do.
Yeah. So, really, we were just trying to figure out, this group of volunteers were trying to figure out how do we reclaim that and give people something fun to do on Saturday nights. And now we've done 3 seasons, 3 years of it. And it's worked really well.
I've got to say, I don't go out. I don't like going out.
Right.
Except
every Saturday night.
But by the time it's supper time, it's time for mismatched flannel pajamas and what can I say? Why can't I find a date? I don't know. Anyway, but Saturdays I've been volunteering for 2 years, and I look forward to that. I'm the old volunteer, but all these young kids, you're all so wonderful, and you're also nice to me, which is great. And you've made that for everybody. And I talk to women and men in their 80s.
So can I tell one more story about that?
Please do.
So 2 summers ago, I was hanging out volunteering at the Wednesdays on the waterfront, which, if people don't know, is not a Newport downtown development thing. That was started by Andrea and Vero years ago, and it's amazing. And I just fell in love with it the first time I went and started going all the time. And I was working under the tent there, giving water out to folks from the water bottles. And I look over, and like 3 feet away from me, there's an older woman who's holding a tent peg, and she's dancing to the music. And I went over and introduced myself, and her name is Jackie LaPierre. She lives up in Derby Line. And we struck up a friendship. And then 6 months later, I took her phone number and I said, "Do you want to dance in the winter?" And she said, "Yeah, but I can't come because I can't drive in the winter."
Do you pick her up?
So, well, for two seasons, yeah, I picked her up mostly. And then she talked some friends into coming from Stansted and Derby Line, and they started driving themselves, and I didn't have to go get her anymore. But for weeks, last year and this year, I would drive up to Derby Line and pick her up, and we have really become friends. She's marvelous. And she loves it. She has so much fun.
I love those ladies, and the men who come down from Quebec are great too.
Yeah, pretty
But
great.
we have become friends with a lot of people in the audience. I just pick up dirty dishes and wash forks, but there's a lot of interaction, and we are so lucky.
Okay, so back to Newport.
Oh yeah, back to Newport.
So that's, I dream of Newport becoming a social and economic hub for the northern NEK and southern part of the Eastern Lakes District, like it used to be.
It was.
Right? And I'm pretty convinced that it's within our grasp. We can bring it back. It won't be exactly the same. The likelihood that we'll never again have large retailers like Sears and Montgomery Wards and JCPenney's on our main street, right? That's not going to happen. But we can create experiences on Main Street, shopping experiences that you can't get by going online or going to a Walmart, right? Or meals, or, I dream of a microbrewery on Main Street at some point, and things for teenagers to do, and a dance hall. Like, all of those things can draw people here, right?
Well,
and that could really change things.
When I was raising my children, I told them that spending money on stuff was really a waste.
Right, it's all about experience.
It's all about experiences, and I didn't have much. So they had a lot of experiences, and they now remember their youth.
Yep.
And I think parents would love that, because now with kids always on iPads and laptops and everything else, to get out with the family, it's hard to draw teenagers or even young ones away from what they're used to doing, playing games.
Well, and this year we got this partnership going with Memphis Magog Science and Education Center, and they've been doing the kids' activities upstairs. And like the other night, Saturday night, they had this game that the kids were playing where they took pool noodles and they were like trying to string them all the way across the room and then see who could get their marbles to roll the farthest across the room down these pool noodles.
We could hear them running around upstairs.
Yeah, it was so cool, right? And that's the thing, trying to help them recognize the power of play together.
And there's no this. They just have fun.
Yeah, devices are okay. They do what they need to do. But really, somehow we've got to reconnect with each other.
Oh, yeah. Winter Saturdays have connected me with the community in a I can be ladylike and still be out unescorted. And I think that's really, really hard for a lot of women my age, because we were raised not to go out
unless you had somebody.
Well, not to a dance or a dance hall,
right,
or anything like that. So it allows, and I see many, many people coming in there as groups with friends who are just for the first time getting out doing this sort of social thing. Would you like to add something to this, young man? No? Tom is sitting here. He's Thomas Goodwin. I have to get him on the show. He's so talented himself. He's modest, but he's extremely talented, and I would never have met Thomas had it not been for those Saturdays.
Probably me neither.
Yeah. So back to Newport.
Yes.
I, as you can tell, I'm not a consummate professional interviewer because I drift.
It's working for me.
Is it really? That's good. I hope it's working for you out there, because he's worth getting to know. But we were talking earlier about the values we grew up with. You grew up with a great example of a grandfather.
Yeah, I grew up pretty close to my grandparents, even though we lived a long way away, because we came here, at least 2 and usually 3 or 4 times a year. And my folks would leave us with my sister and I with my grandparents up here for weeks at a time in the summer. And my grandfather was kind of a classic northern Vermonter. He was pretty taciturn, pretty quiet, very, very dry sense of humor. He could do anything for himself and his neighbors. And I wish I had grown up with him. My cousins who grew up right there on the property, had such a different relationship with him, and I wish I had been closer.
You were the city child.
I was the city child who came and visited on a regular basis, but I was the oldest grandchild also, and my grandmother too. But there was something special about my relationship with my grandfather. He worked in the asbestos mines in Eden Lowell for I don't even know how long, many, many years. Smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day. By the time he was 56 or so, he was on an oxygen machine, tethered to an oxygen machine, and he died at 59 of emphysema.
God.
And he just did amazing things. Like he worked for a number of years after he left the mine. He worked up at Jay as a master carpenter, and he could build pretty much anything. And in 1972, 73, somewhere in there, I was about 9 or 10 years old. He somehow, I really don't understand how he came up with the money or the wherewithal to build this building. He built a massive building on our property. It's huge.
Is that the camp too?
No. We call it the shop because it has a pit with a car, that you can drive a car over and work from underneath a car. Right?
Okay.
And you could probably fit, I'm guessing, 40 cars side by side in this big workshop, and then 2 apartments on top of it. And he and my grandmother lived in one of those 2 apartments, and my uncle lived in the other one for years. And now my cousin owns the building and has raised his family there. And I don't know how the hell he built it.
I don't know how the heck they heat
early 70s, he did not have serious income, right? But somehow it got built.
Listen, he's just like my grandfather. If you build it, they will come. We used to go to the dump. I mean, my grandfather retired to become a vegetable farmer, and I was living with them because my mom was an invalid, so I was the pest that was there all the time. But lucky me. So at the end of the day, working on the farm, vegetables, my grandmother would want to get rid of both of us, so we'd go to the dump.
And just hang out looking for stuff.
I had a 22, he had a 303, and we'd do target practice, but we'd also do what we did first.
I thought you were scrounging at the dump.
No, after that we would go scrounging, but we'd bring home barrels so he could make raccoon traps. We'd bring home De Kuyper bottles so he could have something to put his maple syrup in.
Yeah.
I thought De Kuyper was maple syrup. And so when I was at my cousin's party...
What's De Kuyper?
It's a gin.
Okay.
But it's very pretty bottles. And so I was at my cousin's and she was having a housewarming party. And I said, why did you put maple syrup in the middle of the bar? And she said, that's not maple syrup. And I said, yeah.
It comes out of a maple syrup bottle.
I said, so she poured it into a glass. I said, well, it pours better than Grandpa's.
I'll bet.
I didn't taste it, but I prefer maple syrup. But yeah, he could build anything too.
Yeah. There's something. So yeah, I mean the values, right? So what are the values?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hard work,
hard work.
Making
do for yourself, making do, all those, and caring for your family and for other people. And he was quiet, but when somebody was in need, he's not unusual. This is what Northern Vermont
and what Quebec
and probably a lot of other communities too, right? Like, let's be fair. Rural people know how to depend on each other, and those are the values I learned from him. And some of those stories seem so crazy to the city kid in me, right? Like, at one point, he was telling me a story about how he slept above this shop downstairs where he kept his car with an automatic garage door opener and everything. And one night, in the middle of the night, he hears his garage door open, and somebody starts his car and pulls out and shuts the garage door and goes away. And 2 hours later, the garage door opens again and the car pulls in and closes the door. And 2 days later, one of his neighbors said, "Oh, Archie, I borrowed your car the other night when mine broke down up the road," right? Like, that's what community's supposed to be, right there. I love that.
I love that too.
So
I feel that here. I feel that here.
I do too. I do too. I think
it's coming back.
People are working hard to reclaim that kind of a spirit.
Yeah. And I just did a little video today, the difference between heaven and hell. You go to, this guy went down to hell, and the tour guide said, "Here you go." And there were people, hundreds, thousands of people on a huge buffet table, dining room table, and they were all, this one was like this.
Yep.
I was tied to you, and everybody was tethered.
Shackled.
That too.
So they couldn't.
Shackled. They couldn't get to their food. They couldn't bend their arm. And so he said, "Okay, now you want to go up and see heaven?" And he said, "Sure." So the tour guide in heaven said, "Do this."
Mm-hmm.
But they were feeding each other. Oh, sorry. I guess I don't know who we were feeding, but they could feed each other this way.
Right.
And that's the difference between heaven and hell, is the people who help each other and the people who don't.
I think so.
So I think we're in heaven.
I think so.
And
I think people want this place to be like that. They want to help each other.
Yeah.
So that's really, I mean, at the end of the day, we got to figure out together how we're going to build housing for people in this community.
Well, talk about what you and the group has just purchased in order to make housing.
Oh, that's a fun story. So most people in Newport know about the old Bayview Motel that's been called Richard's Hunting Lodge for like 20 years. That's up on the backside of Newport. It looks out over the South Bay as you go down the hill toward Coventry. Right? And I've had that my eye. I've loved that building for a long time. It's just this funky, crazy. It looks like something out of The Shining, and it's this great old building. And it was for sale. So 4 of us got together and decided to buy it together. And one is a neighbor of mine in Lowell, a guy named Keith, who can do anything. He's a certified master electrician. He can run heavy equipment. He's great. And then another one is Aaron, and he's been a contractor. He can build. And Colin works for Community National Bank as a financial spreadsheet analyst. And so he does numbers, and he's willing to learn. And I've done project management all my life, and I'm a shade tree carpenter. I'm not professional, but I know how to do what I need to do. And the 4 of us figured out how to buy this building, and we're gonna go take it down apartment by apartment, go down to the studs and build it back out so that it's dignified housing in Newport again. And I think probably 2 years from now, it'll probably be around a dozen full-size apartments each with a kitchen. Right now, it has 3 full apartments and like 11 rooms with tiny little bathrooms. But we're gonna convert it so that everything is a full apartment that's been redone and is new. Right now we're tearing out the bar. A lot of people have been in that bar down in the basement underneath the old restaurant, and we're gonna turn that into one room, 900 square foot apartment. It's gonna be so cool.
This house is 960 square feet.
Is it? Yeah.
So that's gonna be a huge apartment.
Yeah, it's maybe I'm overestimating. It might be 800 square feet, but it's close. It's gonna be so fun. It's gonna be really cool. We're having a ball doing it.
I bet you are.
Except last week I nicked a water pipe, and
yes, you did.
And we had to pause while we fixed my mistake. And
live and learn.
Yep.
That's great. I think housing is about the most serious problem around here.
I do too. I think it causes ripple effects in every direction, right? Like the hospital, the schools, the local manufacturers. Nobody can keep good employees, or can get employees to come here because there's no place to live that's affordable.
Right.
And people say, well, what's affordable? And my answer right now is somewhere between $700 and $1,200 a month, depending on what you're doing. Right? That's what people can afford.
Yeah.
And we need a lot more of housing that people can afford in this community.
So how do you think that's going to work out?
Well, the new master plan that we created over the last year, Newport Downtown Development, worked with the city of Newport to create this new kind of detailed master plan. It lays out 9 development sites in downtown Newport, and it aims for 410 new units of housing over the next decade in our downtown core, right? Like on Main Street and the Waterfront Plaza. And the goal is every one of those buildings will also have parking and commercial space in it, so that at the end of the day, we will have created a walkable, livable downtown for northern Vermonters. It's great when tourists want to come, right? Like I love it when visitors come. I've been one all my life here too. But we're not building it for them. We're building it for locals who need a place to live so that they can get a job and stay here, because most of them don't want to leave.
No.
If they didn't have to go, or their kids didn't have to go, they'd figure out a way to stay.
And thank God, my son bought a house down the street from me.
Yeah.
And my daughter just lives over in Montgomery Center. And so many people I've met have said, well, my children had to move away.
Yeah.
And so you're going to bring them back. And you came back. It's very nice. You're out in Coventry. So
have you seen my my Burma shave signs in front of my house? Those.
I don't really know which house is yours up close and personal. But
it's on the other side of Gardner Park on Western.
It's the greenhouse, right?
It's a greenhouse, and right now there are all these pink signs in front of it.
And it's Burma shave?
Yeah. Do you remember the old Burma shave signs?
Yes.
You're Canadian. You don't remember.
I do.
Do you?
But I also remember real.
Most people don't know what Burma shave was, but in those days, this is before the interstate system in the United States, right? And so on all these kind of dangerous two-lane roads through like Route 666, right? Yep. Burma Shave was this company that would put out these brilliant little ditties. They were like little poems, and you would read them one line at a time as you drove over a period of about a mile. And then the last one always said, "It's Burma Shave." And it was a brilliant advertising strategy.
Well, I've seen you do that when you were being elected for city council.
Yeah, well, I took one set and put it back out this year from last year. So they're in front of my house right now. And the sign that I just put out this last week, the set that I put out, talks to exactly that. It says, if you want your kids to stick around, join our effort to improve our town.
Beautiful.
Right?
And I'll tell you something.
And you just want to. I want people to drive by that every day and say, yeah, that's what I want to do.
That's what I want to do, and it's planting. It's subliminal messages.
It's yes,
You know,
it
it's
might be a
like-
little bit subliminal.
It might be a little bit. So it might be overt, but oh gosh, this is an important thought.
Sorry.
Must have been a lie. Anyway, it'll come back to me. Oh, it'll come back to me, but it was important. It was all about you.
I'm sure we'll come back.
Yes. Okay. Keep talking. I'll think about it.
I'm not supposed to be talking.
Okay. Now, I got it back.
Okay.
Tim Smith
Yes,
is a friend of mine.
he is. I don't. Did you tell me that? Maybe I knew that.
Maybe.
I don't think so.
I lived over 30 years.
You should tell people who Tim Smith is.
I will. He is the Grand Poobah of St. Albans, Vermont, and that's Franklin County. That's on the other side of Jay. And I lived over there in Franklin County for about 35, 38 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim is an enormously successful man, but you'd never know it to talk to him. He gives and gives
He's
and
pretty
gives.
humble.
And he had a place in Derby for the longest time. They just gave it up because of the travel and everything. But he instigated the TIF over in St. Albans with a group of other people.
I don't know if he was the instigator or just
He saw it
an
through.
early proponent and really saw it through. He's been mayor for, I think, 6 years. He's in his 4th term, maybe, I think.
Yeah, and he came over here to Newport to talk about the possibilities of what Rick and his group are planning for our town. And you look at something that says 10 years, like Winooski, 10-year plan, and people say, oh my God. But you know, I moved here 6 years ago, and that went really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It will go, and you will be astounded. St. Albans, I never liked it. I had my TV show there and everything. I used to have to drive in through St. Albans, and it was, and I taught at BFA, and I taught at all the schools there when I had my newspaper. And Tim sponsored it, by the way. Tim Smith has always been generous.
Mm-hmm.
And now you go there, you don't want to leave.
No, it's a beautiful little town now.
And
Little city.
and it's a party town. People come out for street dances and for everything. It's a safe town, but it's gorgeous and economically viable.
Mm-hmm.
And
You know what Tim and others there on the staff, Dominic Cloud and Chip Sawyer, Arlie Young, they all are part of that mix over there. And part of what they've taught me is that, you know, most individuals think 10 years is a very long time.
Yeah,
Right?
that's,
And most businesses think planning 25 years out is being prudent and thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time. But they say what a city needs to do is think 100 years out. Because we're making decisions right now that will impact the city of Newport for the next 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we
and
need
I'll
to-
be around.
Yeah, maybe neither of us will be.
No,
Little
I want to live
mustache.
to be 140.
So,
So I'm halfway there.
I'm trying to do the math here, and it's pretty much not adding up, Heather. So, yeah, just saying. Anyway,
Vote
so
for
the
him anyway.
point is that, you know, if we really want this town to have an impact, that would be what 100 years would be 3 to 4 generations from now, right? And if we want to have that kind of impact, we've got to take some risks right now to lay the groundwork so that people will have the kind of viable lifestyle. The town will have enough to live on. I mean, right now we've got a problem with, everybody knows it, taxes are really high here,
Yeah.
right? And there's no way that's going to change unless we start building more housing and more thriving businesses, and there's more property on the grand list. And that, over time, is what turns a town like ours around. So last year, we had a really high tax hit last year. The increase was significant. And at the same time, St. Albans' tax increase was less than a percentage point
Yeah, I know.
from the previous year. And you got to do it by
It's an investment, not
building.
a sacrifice.
That's right.
And or a temporary sacrifice, but a huge investment. And you say, I can't take any more, but if you want to live here, we have to think ahead. And
Well, and so we should describe what a TIF is, because most people don't know.
okay,
So can I do that?
tax incentive.
Tax increment financing.
Oh, there you go.
So the way a TIF works is basically you've got an empty property. Let's just use the whole, which I like to call the development opportunity.
It's an opportunity.
On Main Street, right?
Yeah.
So that property is sitting there. It's generating, I don't know, I'm making this up, somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 or $50,000 a year on our grand list in taxes, right? Because it's only worth $2 million, the whole block. But if we built a $40 million building on that property, instead of a $2 million property, we'd have a $40 million property generating, I haven't done the math, but a lot more income.
Yeah.
And so basically, TIF means, the problem of course is that property's been sitting there for 9 years with no one buying it to develop it. And everybody says, well, how come the city of Newport hasn't made that happen? And the answer is, developers will not buy it right now because there are too many unknowns and the risks are too high and they can't figure out how to make it pay. So what they need is public infrastructure. They need the community to partner with them to take care of the scariest parts of that development, like the fact that we have a clay sewer pipe running down the middle of our main street that is going to have to be replaced in order to do serious development work downtown, right? And if we don't replace it as a community, some developer somewhere is not going to do it for us because they can't make the numbers work in a community like Newport. So the idea is we would say, okay, we're going to put in that new clay pipe. To pay for that, we're going to take a loan. It's called a bond. We're going to get the community's permission. We're going to float a bond. We're going to pay for that infrastructure development, rip up our downtown street for a little bit of time and put that new pipe in, right? And then a developer will come in and say, sure, I'd be happy to build 90 units of housing and commercial and parking on that property now. And the difference between the current value of the tax and the future value of the tax on that future property, that difference is what pays back the loan that we took to build the new the new sewer pipe.
Right.
Okay, that's what matters. And
I've never started a business with my own money.
It's
But
really
no,
you've always done it with other people's money.
with other people's money,
There you go.
and they get it back plus some, and they're very, very happy.
When it's done appropriately, right? And it could take us, I mean, honestly, 15 to 20 years to pay back the loan that we're going to take.
But we'll be getting income.
But well, there'll be a lot of income coming in, but the money we'll keep getting the same income we've been getting on that property until the loan is paid back.
Right.
And then after that, now from 20 years from now through 100 years from now,
Gravy.
it's all money that's going to go right to the grand list. So, I like to call it a get rich slow campaign. It's not going to happen overnight.
Nothing actually does if it's worth it.
Right. You got to invest and take the time.
And well thought out. So,
It's worked for a lot of other places.
And another thing I wanted to mention to everybody, the country is having a bit of a hiccup right now. And I was talking to Rick about how I felt about that. And I was worried about federal funding being cut, which is happening. We just lost a couple of really good nonprofits in the last 10 days because of federal funding cutting. And Rick said, that's true. But what I'm going to do is put all my energy into Newport.
Right.
And that really encouraged me because you can worry about national politics, you can worry about your country being at odds with other countries, but there is no way I can do anything about that.
Right.
But I can do something here.
You want to hear something really fun? And
I'd love to hear something really fun and ironic.
There are numerous people in town who have told me clearly that they support President Trump. Mm-hmm. And they also support my mayoral candidacy. And anybody who knows me knows that my politics, kind of writ large, right, on the national scale, definitely do not trend toward President Trump.
Yeah.
And so I will say to people, like, why would you do that? And their answer is, because you get stuff done.
Definitely.
And I'm interested in getting stuff done. And so they like Trump for that reason. Whatever I may think about him over the last month, nobody can claim he's not taken action, right? I may think it's misguided and headed the wrong direction. It kind of doesn't matter because, as you say, I don't have a say about that. But we have a lot of say together about Newport. And if we can agree, like, did you go to the, after the Wyman report came out saying about the hospital, and there was this thing down at the Gateway Center, and like 200 people showed up, and I looked around that room and I thought,
together we stand.
These people are all over the political spectrum, really.
But we have
an economic spectrum. And everybody in that room knew one thing. We cannot let this hospital go.
Definitely not.
So
I was so
that's
proud.
what I'm interested in, is what are we all able to agree on together right here in this place and make it happen?
I think that's a very good way to look at it, because when I was at that meeting, I had nothing to say. I thought I did, but then I heard other people speaking. They were so much more eloquent than I, so much more well-versed than and I thought, I'm not worried about this. We've got so many smart people here who have history here, who know what we have here. So I think
my mom, who's 79, went with me to Montpelier last week, and for the first time in her life, made a speech in front of cameras for a press conference about North Country Hospital.
How many people went?
Beautiful.
I'd like to see that.
Oh my gosh, it was beautiful. It was really great. I have a video of it that somebody took, but I wasn't able to capture, like, from Channel 5 was there doing it, and I'm sure they got it on film, but
Oh, and
Anyway, it was pretty cool to see my mom doing that.
with the 14 stitches and the black
Yeah, because she
eye?
had just taken a flyer off the half a flight of stairs onto the concrete floor in her basement,
She didn't fool around.
and she went to North Country Hospital.
And I've been there since I've lived here maybe 6 times.
Really? Spending a lot of time there.
I like the beds. What can I say? And the nurses are so great. I mean, fabulous. So I show up, and I've got a broken thumb because I fell in my driveway. I got bit by a dog. It's like, hiya, he put his. It was very, very painful, and I need a lot of. I had so much antibiotic. I could have dated the entire British fleet if it docked beside the Northern Star. Anyway, but they're so kind over there, and I don't. And then I tripped over a wire. They put a wire to measure traffic on it, but they didn't tie it down.
And you tripped on that?
Anyway, that was the rib cage. And so otherwise I just go over to visit because I expect to be injured. But they're really nice. And I need it there. And so many of us at my age said, if it goes, what are we going to do? I don't drive. I can't drive to Dartmouth.
Right. That's right. I mean, honestly, no one's going to move here. And few people are going to stay here if there's not a hospital and good rural health care. Right? So all the stuff we're dreaming on for downtown Newport, 400 units of housing, a new commercial space, and a new community rec center, and all these things we want to do, not going to happen if we let that hospital go. And it's not going to happen because somebody somewhere says, close that hospital. No. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
We'll cut this service, and that service, and that service, and then finally it'll just be a logical business decision to close it down because it's not making any money anyway.
So,
right. So we've got to stop.
How's that fight going?
Well, so I was on a phone call today with a group of community organizers, and we're going to hold a meeting in the middle of April that the entire community will be invited to come to help us plan an active long-term campaign, not just to save North Country Hospital, but to improve rural health services here in the North Country and across the state. So we're going to start that. We're going to kick that off in mid-April. We just talked about it for an hour this morning.
You're involved in a lot of things.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fun because you end up in this job for Newport Downtown Development, and depends on how creative you are. You can spin it a lot of directions.
Well, I guess you've been on with Pam, and you've talked a lot about Newport Downtown Development, but let me just say how it's affected me.
Yes.
I moved here 6 years ago from the other side of the mountain. I was in Berkshire. And moving over here, I felt like I was coming home, but there was a lot of discord in the town. Mm-hmm. And I was about to open my clinic, and I was, an artist, and I was about to start selling paintings and stuff like that, and I'm Airbnb, and if you don't have 3 jobs in Vermont, you're considered unemployed anyway.
Or lazy.
Yeah, right. And I was working for JetBlue at the time, so everything worked out really nicely. But I was told by someone who was from away, but came every summer, don't even think of starting a business here; it will fail. And I looked at them and I said, well, that's not possible. We have people in town. If you build it, they will come. Definitely. I'm not worried. They said, no, don't worry about it. Just don't even bother. And I said, well, see you next summer. When you're injured, you can come to my clinic. Anyway, so I saw that attitude it was pervasive. Mm-hmm. And it has dissipated. And now the people you meet are so positive. Some of them are just getting to be positive. Some of them are already there. Mm-hmm. But that has a lot to do with the people you've brought together to work for the benefit of this town. They're young, they're brilliant, they're enthusiastic, and they want their children to grow up here. Mm-hmm. Or they want their dogs to be well trained here. They just absolutely make this whole place wonderful for me. And I just follow in their wake.
Yeah, it's a great story and a great way to put it. And let's be real. Newport has had a rough time for several decades. Mm-hmm. And I don't blame people for feeling discouraged. Really. I mean, it's been a hard place to live. And part of the magic has got to be that those folks who have felt isolated or shoved aside or discouraged over the last several decades, little by little, it's a trust thing, right? Getting folks to come back and say, okay, I'll invest again. Because, it feels like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, right?
Yeah.
Like, why should I come kick that football? I know you're going to pull it away, right? And
I never liked that comic strip. Continue.
I loved it, but I grew up on it. So, but anyway, part of what we have to do is just keep earning people's trust.
Yeah.
And that's new folks who've just moved here recently, but it's also really about folks who've been around a very long time and making sure they can see themselves in what we're doing. They got to be able to see them, their own values.
It's true. It's not a case of fake it till you make it. It is a case of if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, I think so.
And in the last 6 years, I've gone from feeling completely alone here, which was fine because I'm pretty much a cloistered person anyway, to feeling like I belong. And that's all because of your trickle-down effect of everyone you've made. They've been very inclusive for themselves, so it's like a huge umbrella, and they pass along that inclusivity. They see somebody just hanging out looking like a third wheel, or is it a fifth wheel? Depends if you're on a bike or in a car.
Anyway,
right?
an extra wheel.
Yeah, spare tire.
That'd be a reference to me.
Yeah, no, me. Anyway, whatever part of the car you are, they reach out, and they're just so kind, and it's a huge attitude adjustment here. It's a smile over the town now, and I feel it, and I am quite often downtown now, and I feel it on the street.
Yeah, I feel it too.
And I love it so much.
Yeah.
How long have we been talking? Because I don't keep time.
About 45 minutes.
How much time do you have to spend? What else would you
We
like
should wrap
to
up
say?
soon. I think we covered most of what I wanted to come talk about. Anything else on your mind?
Well, you're running without any opposition.
Yes, that's right.
So what are your chances?
In Newport, it's not over till it's over.
It's not over till
So I'm not counting on anything. I'm holding events and talking with a lot of people and putting signs out and saying, I want to talk about what we can all do together for this town.
that's the word, together. Where I come from over in Franklin County, everything was together. And everything happened. I want a concert in my backyard, boom, everyone's there pitching in. I want my house to be a town library, boom, everybody, free electrical, lawn sales for all the wood that's mixed, because I couldn't go out much, I'd had an accident, so everything happened at my house or I didn't get it done. But everybody in Franklin County pitched in to help me no matter what. You want to start a newspaper? Boom, there you go. When I moved over here, I didn't get that feeling of support right away, but I have it now. I feel that everything's inclusive now. I feel really good when I walk down the street, Main Street. I feel everybody's willing to help each other. The first person who helped me, Rick DeRoche, you met a lot of people, just like Rick when you first moved here. They helped you get to where you are, and now you're passing that help along.
That's exactly the point, right? It's not about me. It's actually about all of us. And, you know, I can name 20 couples off the top of my head who are in their late 20s, 30s, who have moved here in the last 3 or 4 years because they wanted to live in a place with these values in a beautiful spot in the world where they could access the lake and the trails and the mountains and do all these things, right? And they're amazing. And it's also true that there are people like Rick DeRoche and others who have been here a very long time, and they've been working at this stuff steady. They never gave up. And if it weren't for the effort that they've been making, there'd be no traction in what we're trying to do.
No, you're standing on the shoulder of giants.
Absolutely.
And
Collectively, this community is a giant.
Yeah.
And we just have to help people believe that we can do this hard thing. My daughter has a 17 or 18-month-old daughter now, my granddaughter, who's by far and away the sweetest, best-looking, smartest granddaughter anyone has ever had.
A genius.
And Freya, her name is Freya. And my daughter, she's her own miracle story, and someday I'll tell you that whole story. But my daughter says to Freya all the time when Freya gets frustrated or starts to cry, she says, "You can do hard things. How can I help you?"
Oh, you raised her properly.
I'll tell you what, boy, nothing could make me more proud than watching her parent her child. She's amazing.
Is she really?
Yeah, and she said, you know, and so I think about it all the time. I think this is a really hard thing we're trying to do. And what we have to do is just help people believe. Together, we can do hard things.
We can do hard things.
There it is.
And we're ready to do hard things. You've done it all your life. So have I. Some things are harder than others, but we get through. But to get through and succeed, that's the goal. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Rick for mayor, and a humble man with ambition, ethics, and really good Vermont values, even if he has lived away. Anyway, Thanks for watching Life
Thanks,
is Good.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. And I'll see you all next week.
Really gonna rock tonight.